Welcome everybody to our AMA workshop with our guest expert Nathan Ingram. Nathan will be talking to us about problem clients and how to address that. We're so excited to have you, Nathan. I'll have you introduce yourself after I share a few things. Guys, Nathan is an amazing agency owner. He has been in the space for well over a decade. Many people who I consider friends and trusted experts in this space speak nothing but highly of him. Nathan is also owner of Monster Contracts. In effect, a simple, easy to use, comprehensive contract proposal for agencies, especially in the WordPress space. But I've used aspects of that agreement for some of our SaaS development work, so it works out really great. Nathan has also not only ran his own agency, but coached other freelancers and agencies, well versed in the agency space. If there's anyone in the agency space that is involved in WordPress, Nathan probably knows them, or he knows, or they know him. And so we're super excited for this workshop, Nathan. Please understand, guys, Nathan's going to start with an intro and then he'll jump right into the presentation. We'll do Q&A at the end. If there's something really urgent, obviously raise your hands. I'll try to get to you. Otherwise, we'll do Q&A at the end. I'll now pass that over to you, Nathan. Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff. I appreciate that. Can everybody see the slides?
Yep.
Great. So this is a passion topic for me. I've been talking about how to deal with problem clients for many years. As we were talking about on the pre-show, I first gave this talk about 10 years ago at WordCamp Tampa. And it's an incredibly important topic. And if you've been in any group of people who work with doing WordPress things with clients, inevitably the conversation comes around to somebody's horror story of a problem client that all of a sudden took control of their life and business, and it just occupied so much of their headspace for so long. And it's something, it's a shared problem that we all deal with, and it's helpful to understand how to address it. Whenever I talk to a group of WordPress freelancers or agency owners, the one thing I've learned, there's probably somebody in the audience who is one more bad client away from throwing in the towel. They've just had enough. And it's a shame because most of our problems that we deal with clients can be either mitigated or eliminated by really good systems and processes. And that's really the essence of the talk today. So as Cliff mentioned, my name is Nathan Ingram. I've been working with web clients for 30 years now. I started building websites for clients in 1995, and I've been a growth coach for micro agencies for over 10 years now. I started that back in 2014. When it comes to this topic of problem clients, I'll say I'm an expert, at least by the definition of Dr. Niles Bohr, who said an expert is a person who has found out by his own painful experience all of the mistakes that one can make in a very narrow field. And by that definition, I am absolutely an expert. I have horror stories of problem clients that are behind every one of these slides here. This is where we're going today. Just a quick overview. We're going to first talk about this concept of friendly monsters. Then we're going to quickly move into these 4, what I call fences, that we all need to have in our businesses in order to protect them from problem clients. And the second part of the talk is about 4 different monsters that you need to know and how to contain them. And depending on time, we'll throw in an extra bonus monster to make 5. So as Cliff mentioned earlier on, I did write a book about this about 5 years ago, dealing with problem clients. The link is there at monstercontracts.com. You can grab a paperback or Kindle right from Amazon. All right. So clients are friendly monsters. That's the proposition of this talk here. Every client you deal with is a friendly monster. And we all, as business owners, need to learn how to build fences or business systems in our work to protect us from these friendly monsters. We have to keep the monsters contained, or they're going to waste our time, our money, and really most importantly, our emotional capital. So there are 4 fences that we're going to talk about today. The first fence is clarity. The second one is commitments. The third is communication. The fourth is documentation. And we have to have at least these 4 fences in our business in some way, because every single client that we deal with has the potential for transformation. Even friendly monsters have teeth. And so we need to build these 4 fences in our businesses. Now, the nice thing about what I'm going to present to you is clarity, commitments, communication, documentation. I'm not talking about a specific software product you should use or anything like that. These are principles that can show up in a lot of different ways depending on how you work and what your business is like. Let's talk about these four fences. The first of which is clarity. Now, as we start to unpack the idea of clarity, the first thing I want to mention is that agreement with a client does not equal clarity. In my experience, the most common reason that client relationships suffer is a lack of clarity. Don't confuse agreement with clarity. You can have agreement where the client is nodding their head like this, but they really don't understand what you're talking about. There's no meeting of the minds. And sometimes that's because we're using technical jargon that muddies the water. Or I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but sometimes the client doesn't tell you everything. And when that happens, whose fault is it? And I would suggest it's probably 50-50. Maybe the client should have given us information, but maybe we should have asked better questions to uncover the information that we need. And that's really an important piece of this clarity puzzle. As people working with clients, yes, you have to be good at tech to be in the web business, but you also have to have a little bit of skill understanding and dealing with people. We have to develop the skill of asking good questions so that we uncover the expectations the client has that they may not even know how to articulate. But asking questions and getting to clarity, not just sitting at the surface, but really digging down deep with good questions, that's a soft skill that can truly set you apart from other web developers out there the client might consider working with. Always ask questions, never assume, because assumptions create confusion. A lack of clarity often comes from the fact that we're making assumptions about what the client wants, or the client is making assumptions about what we're going to provide. So you have to ask yourself, what is the client assuming that you're going to do? Or what are you assuming the client is going to do? If you zoom out and take a look at your processes in your business, and hopefully you have a process for the work that you're doing, what are the assumptions in your process? Every project is an opportunity to uncover assumptions, improve clarity, and strengthen your fences. I can't tell you how many times I've been working with a client and just assumed they thought something or knew something, and they didn't have any idea. And really, why would they? They're not the web person. They've probably never done this before. And so we need to come in and create clarity in everything we do. And there's some ways we can do that. It really revolves around just being specific about what your expectations are for you and for the client. Having a discovery form with questions that you ask for every client, every project, every time. If you don't have a good checklist for that first discovery call with a client, or a form on your website or something like that, where all the questions get asked every time, and you're just trying to rely on your own memory to keep a good list of questions, I promise you'll end up forgetting the question that you absolutely should have asked in that conversation. So having a good, consistent discovery form, articulating exactly what you're going to do in the scope of work in your proposal, and of course, having a contract where all of your expectations are spelled out for the client. You know, how your process works, what happens in a given scenario, like what happens if they delay payment, or what happens if they disappear during a project. Sure, that's never happened to anybody here. There's one of our client monsters that's exactly this person. What happens when you do that? What happens if you need to fire the client, or if they need to fire you? What's going to happen after the website launches? Do we actually know when the website development is complete? How do you handle SEO or compliance with accessibility or privacy laws? All these things need to have clarity. And that's what we're talking about in this fence. All right. So the second fence that we need to develop in our business is the fence of commitments. Healthy relationships, all healthy relationships, are built on clear commitments. Now, have you ever thought about client relationship in that term? Now, if you're married or you have a significant other, you probably understand the idea of commitments, and healthy relationships have clear commitments back and forth. My wife and I celebrated 30 years of marriage last year. I can't believe we made it that long, but we did, and we survived. But it's all about clear commitments, right? We know what to expect out of each other most of the time. But when you put this in terms of a client, I never really thought about this in terms of a client relationship. For many years, when I first started off in doing the web, and working with clients, I did everything wrong. I really didn't have a good mentor to show me the ropes of how I ought to deal with clients. For me, if the client signed the check, that was the commitment. They're going to pay me. I'm just going to get it done and make it happen, put on my Superman cape and just make it happen. And what I quickly discovered was clients took advantage of that. And I ended up investing so much time and mental and emotional capital, and it was a mess. So the client needs to have clarity on the commitments that they're going to be asked to make through the project. And so what I invite my coaching clients especially to do is to design and continuously improve a process that includes opportunities for the client to make commitments at key points. So I want to give an example of this. When my kids were little, they're both grown now, but when my kids were little, we'd do board games a lot. Family board game night was Friday night. And so this is a board game, and we're going to drop in our friendly monster right here at the top of this game. And I want to show you how a process of commitments could work. So let's say this new client reaches out to you and you have your first contact with this client. Hopefully there's a discovery form where you're asking them to provide information. So before they get any time on your calendar, I ask any potential client to invest a little time with me, maybe 10, 15 minutes tops, to complete a discovery form so that I understand a little bit about what we're talking about. Now, why is this important? A lot of folks just put their calendar link out there and allow a client to book time. And you're giving an hour of your time before the client's provided anything for you. So I always like to have just that little ask of commitment at the beginning to get some information before I then will commit some time back to them. Now, if they do that, then we'll move on to a discovery call. So I'll commit an hour to my time if they've given an hour of my time, if they've given me 10 minutes of theirs to complete our discovery form. And at the end, we'll talk about what the website is going to be and do. And at the end of that, in most cases, unless it's a really complicated project, I'll give them some sort of a ballpark price just to be in the general area of what the cost is going to be like. Because I don't want to waste time writing a proposal, which can take some time, unless we're at least clear on the general area of money we're talking about for this project. So if they commit that, yes, they're okay with that ballpark price, then I'll move on to the next phase, which is the documents and the deposit. So I'll write that proposal, invest time to do that. I'll send them a contract. So documents and deposit, I'm going to ask them to sign those documents and make a commitment and give a deposit, 50% usually, depending on the project, before we go any further. So when they sign off and make that big commitment, write that big check, we'll move on to the next phase of the project, which is content. So we do content first. We're going to spend some time to define what the content is, the content architecture, and we'll create a content guide. And they're going to give us all of their content, words, images, media, all the things, and sign off on it that it's approved. Again, commitment before we move to the next step, which is design. So at this point, we'll build a visual design representing a couple of pages based on the content they've provided. And they're going to sign off and commit to that design before we ever move to the next phase, which is development. Now, you see these little waypoints along the way here where there's commitment asked from the client. And this keeps us moving forward. If the client wants to move backwards and uncommit to something they previously approved, that's going to cost money. And that's spelled out in our contract. So this helps to keep us projects on track and helps us from having to, oh, wow, we have to change the whole color scheme right before we launch the site. That's no fun. So when we get to development, we're committing a lot of time, obviously, and then we'll move into the revisions and approval from the client. So the client will sign off on the fact that, yes, or make any revisions that are needed. And they're going to sign off, yes, this does meet the scope of work. The scope of work is complete. And we're going to move into launch, which means they're going to complete our launch approval form and send the final payment before the launch happens. So see, back and forth through this whole process. And then, of course, hopefully getting them into a good website management plan for the long term. But throughout this process, you can see the back and forth. They commit, we commit, back and forth. It's a reciprocal process to build a website. And this is something I explained to the client in that first meeting of how our process works, just so they're not surprised by that. All right, so commitments are super important, and we have to regularly and clearly define those expectations and consequences at those strategic points in the development process. Whenever a commitment point comes, we just remind them, this is where we are in the process. We're asking you to sign off on this. I have to go back and redo some of this work that you've approved, there will be an additional cost. And this is clearly spelled out in the contract, but it's also, I'll bring this up in calls, Zoom calls, or through an email throughout the conversation around the project. If you do this, we do that. If you don't do this, then we don't do that. And it's important to do this regularly, not just assume they're going to read the contract, but keeping the client relationship on track with regular communication about this, because you can tell some clients the same thing 100 times and they don't stay told, as my mom would say. So we have to do this regularly. And that really leads us into the third fence, which is communication. Great quote here from George Bernard Shaw. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has occurred. We can sometimes think we communicate clearly and we don't do too good of a job at that. But there truly are few things that can improve a client's experience more when working with you than clear, consistent communication. And if you want to set yourself apart from other people who do what you do, become great at communicating clearly with your clients. And this is really important because without consistent communication, clients usually make assumptions and they usually assume the worst. So sometimes that means communicating when we would rather not. So, for example, I don't know if this has ever happened to you. I'm sure none of you would make a mistake like this. But for me, for many years, if I would be stuck in some problem in a website development project that I did not foresee, like some weird thing is happening, I would go hide in the cave. Like I would go, I just hope the client doesn't call, hope the client doesn't email. And I'm just going to bury myself in a hole until I can get this worked out. Then I'll come up from air and talk to the client. And what I learned was that can create delays and the client doesn't know what's going on. And they're making assumptions that he disappeared, what happened, what's going on. They start to make assumptions and they usually assume the worst. So communication says, you got to be transparent with the client. And so I adopted from my friend Aaron Flynn something that I've come to call the weekly email strategy. And it's basically a simple email that goes out every week that has a 3-sentence update, basically past, present, future. Past, this is what we did this week on the project. Present, this is where things are now in terms of the project completion and timeline. Future, this is what we're going to be doing next week. And if you have any questions or concerns, just let us know. Like it should take just a few minutes to send that email. At one point, I had a coaching client that was taking like 30 minutes per email to give this long up. That's not the point. It's a quick email, just a quick project update. Keep the client informed, invite communication. And this is the place to say, we were working on your WooCommerce store this week, and we had some kind of problem with it connecting to the Stamps API. It put us behind a couple of days. We'll pick it up next week. It's a time to communicate something like that, just as a habit every week, just to keep the client informed of what's going on. You don't have to overshare, but just be clear and communicate.
Nathan, I'm going to stop here just to say I think this is so valuable. Many of us may gloss past it. In reflection, in my agency, we've had some multi six-figure projects that we worked on. So they're fairly large. And oftentimes the client expects specific things to be done because you put them in the proposal and then you hit a roadblock. And so internally, there have been times where I told our team, hey, look, it's our job to solve these problems, and we didn't communicate the problem that we ran into. So internally, it became a problem, but the communication was never given to the client. And so then we go past 10 hours, and then 15, and then 20 hours passed. And we're like, we'll solve it. So then we solve it, and we don't communicate it to the client. And then a couple of weeks later, as part of the sprint, we run into another problem, and I don't communicate it. And then internally, this is me being vulnerable, is that I start getting frustrated with the project. And then when the client asks for something that may not be that big, I'm now struggling and trying to push back, but I've not communicated the challenges we face. So they can't appreciate what we've absorbed. And I also can't appreciate their appreciation because I have not communicated that, right? And I just want to share, this is huge because if not effectively done, it resets so many different wins that you may have had along the way on a project, and then internalizes stress, and then you're looking to your team, and this project becomes something that you were super excited to be doing, to be like, oh my God, I just want it over with. So thank you for sharing this. I just wanted to share, even someone like me who's been in this space for 20 years, has tried to do the right thing by meeting client expectations, but lack of communication then led to deterioration in the relationship on both sides, and it just needed clear communication.
Ah, I love it. It's so true. And I love what you said, Cliff, about it's what I call the story I'm telling myself in my head is that all these things are happening. And there's what happened and how I think about it or how I respond to it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how just taking a minute and working that out in my head and communicating with the client helps to solve all those things. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Cliff.
Sure thing.
That pulls us into our fourth fence, and that is the fence of documentation. Documentation is not fun, but it's so important because if you don't document, you're relying on your own memory, which for me is not awesome sometimes. Or worse, maybe you're relying on the client's memory that they made decisions or set agendas or whatever. So we have to get used to communicating and writing. Even if you're a person who likes to talk on the phone, great, or do Zoom calls, great, but get used to communicating in email. Even if a decision is made verbally during a call or in a meeting or whatever, email the client afterwards to confirm what was decided. There's one of the client types we'll get to in a minute that just tends not to remember anything and makes changes about things all the time. But written communication is referenceable. So you can go back and remind them. Documentation, absolutely key. The takeaway on this fence is that all of us need to have some kind of system where we can easily store and track project communication. For many folks, that's going to look like a project management app, especially if you have a team. And there's lots of those. For some folks, like when I was just working solo, Trello was it. I put everything in Trello. But the point was, it was there and I knew where it was. And it's somewhere other than email. I can't tell you how many times I would go back and look for some decision that was made, and it happened to be like 13 levels deep in an email thread where the subject line had nothing to do with what we were talking about. So some sort of system where we can keep good documentation and that is referenceable later. Now, which is the best? I don't know. The best is the one that you are going to consistently use. The nature of us, as I self-identify as a geek, and the nature of us geeks is that we love to explore all the apps or even build some custom elaborate solution that we never end up using. And so just whatever you're going to use that is the least friction for you to actually put documentation in there, use that. Even if it's a Google Doc, like it doesn't matter. Just be consistent and always use it. So those are our four fences. Our clients, these friendly monsters, have to be contained by good systems and processes in the areas of clarity, commitments, communication, and documentation. Now, one little note before we actually get into these friendly monsters themselves, and that is this: don't tear down your fences. If you take time to invest in good systems and processes, good software, good strategies to bring clarity and commitments and communication and documentation to your business, don't fall prey to what I see constantly in my coaching conversations. And that's tearing down your own fences. And this is especially important if you are a nice person and you tend to let clients weasel out of the commitments that they've made to you. If you're like me, you want to be nice to your clients, and that's not a bad thing. But I'll start to make excuses in my own mind about why clients were doing these things or not doing these things just to avoid some kind of confrontation with the client. Oh, it's not a big deal. They're paying me. They'll be better next time. Or I might even call it good customer service and pat myself on the back.
Yep.
But it's going to come back to bite you. You've built fences. You have a process. If the client breaks the rules, even if your tendency is to be nice and give them a second chance, what I'm telling you is you can still be nice and still hold the client to a commitment that they made. So don't break your own rules. Don't tear down your own fences, because this is what will happen inevitably. It happened to me for many years until I finally got my head straight about this. You might have something that a client pushes back or wants to change something or go out of bounds of the system that you've created. And you decide to be nice and let them get away or change or whatever. It's just this one time, whatever excuse you make up in your head for the client being able to do this. What will happen is that pat on the back and that warm feeling you might get for 5 minutes will quickly curdle and start to turn into some resentment toward that client. And by the end of the day, you're just all fed up with all the things and all the clients. And you go up, for me, my office was in the basement in those early years. I'd go upstairs and I would fuss at the dog and I would be frustrated with my kids or whatever. And so what would end up happening, at least to me, I'm sure none of you would ever do this, but to me, I was nice to the client and mean to everybody else in my life. So instead of letting a stranger essentially live with the consequences of the actions, their own actions, which they earned, I end up taking it out on the people that are closest to me in my life. And it's insanity. It's insanity. So that's why I say build defenses and then don't tear them down.
Yeah, Nathan, I totally agree, and I think everyone, if they were honest, has probably at some point done that. I'm a people pleaser, and I have every single one of these I've violated. In fact, yesterday I had to reinforce a couple of these with an ideal client, right? And I think if we're honest, most of us don't measure what Nathan just spoke on, which is what does that emotional impact look like once you step out of your home office or you come back home from your regular office, right? And what that cost is for those that you love, or even your own personal health and well-being. And in my opinion, it's priceless. Another mindset shift in here, I believe, Nathan, a lot of people need to have is that this is a win-win for both parties, right? I know how you run your business, your person of integrity. If this is done well, it doesn't just benefit you, it actually benefits our clients, all of our clients. The way I look at it is we're trusted advisors. And if we go into it, let's just say I was dealing with chemotherapy or I was dealing with a major case and I was speaking to a lawyer or a doctor, I would want them to have clarity. I would want them to communicate the difficult things. I would ensure and want them to keep their commitments. And if I violated that, which I have, right? Because I'm a control freak and sometimes I think I know more than others, like our clients do sometimes. I really appreciate when they put boundaries and they educate and empower me to understand where they're coming from, because that helps reinforce the effective balance between who's the expert while making sure I'm heard. So I just wanted to say, like, for those of you that look at this and are thinking, like, I just need to keep my friendly monster in the cage, just understand that they have a perspective and you might be in there. And sometimes you need to balance this out as well. And it's a win-win when we can effectively do this, understanding that both parties benefit by doing this long term if it's an ideal client. Now, there will be problematic ones where sometimes I'm sure Nathan's going to talk, where sometimes you got to let the monster go. You got to do whatever you got to do. But I just wanted to share that as another takeaway that if done, this is a win-win for both parties and not just you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ironic thing that took me years to learn was that good clients appreciate the fences. It's the bad clients that are offended and can't believe you would want whatever.
That's right.
All right, so let's talk about some of those problem clients. These are now 4 monsters you should know and how to contain them in your fences. So, what I want to say first of all here is that there are great clients out there. I have wonderful clients, especially if they're happening to watch this video for some reason. They're wonderful clients. There's also these terrible clients out there who don't care about you. They don't treat you fairly. They walk all over you if you let them. And that's why we have to build fences, because you don't know what kind of client you're dealing with at the front end. So that's why it's critical to have those fences built so that misbehaving clients don't trample over the rest of your life. Now, here's the first friendly monster. We're going to call this one the invisible man. Now, by the way, these are gender neutral terms. There are plenty of invisible women out there too, right? So the invisible man, this is how you recognize one of these. An invisible man will express interest and then disappear unexpectedly. It might happen just when you're trying to get a discovery call scheduled. They reschedule that several times, or they're really hot and they're back and forth email, and then boom, they just disappear. They take forever to respond. They're hot and then cold and then hot again. Now, these people are usually well-intentioned in my experience. Like, they're not malicious, they're just busy. They have 18 number one priorities. And the day they reached out to you, the website was the number one of the number one priorities. But tomorrow, something else is now their number one priority. The website just is not a priority anymore at that point. What we have to learn about these folks is the invisible man doesn't change once they sign your proposal and contract. They will tend to disappear during the project too. and then reappear all of a sudden with unreasonable demands when timing gets critical. That's what I call the invisible man just became the stealth bomber. They appear out of nowhere, they just drop bombs everywhere. And I used to get so angry at these clients. Like, why are they doing this to me? And the answer was because I was letting them do it to me. And we have to recognize these folks and have some processes in place. Oftentimes, this is language in a contract that protects us from this sort of situation. So, the containment strategy and the fence that works really well with the invisible man is the clarity focus. So, we need to make sure the client understands the process in the contract, but also in verbal and written reminders. Because again, you can tell some clients the same thing 100 times, but they don't stay told. So we need language in our project, in our contract on suspended and abandoned projects. And at some point, the project might even time out. If they've been asleep for a year, that project just may be gone. And your proposal, by the way, the pricing in your proposal should always time out too. And we reminded us that weekly email is a good time to remind, hey, I haven't heard from you in 30 days. And if we don't hear from you in the next couple of weeks, your project is going to be considered suspended and subject to that line in the contract, et cetera, et cetera. We have to hold these clients to the consequences that their behavior warrants. Otherwise, we're training them to misbehave further and we're creating a monster. So we need to have this kind of clarity in our contract. Now, what's really important here also is clarity is absolutely critical if the invisible man disappears and there's a delay in the project, because projects that are delayed tend to create more scope creep and make expectations harder to manage, because next year, this invisible man's business is not going to look the same probably as it did when you started this project. So that's why it's so important to have something in a contract that says, if the project is suspended for so long, when you come back, we may or may not credit. That's up to you. You credit what they paid already or not, but we're going to recreate a new scope of work and it's going to have a new price, because likely maybe your rates have changed since then or whatever. But delays create scope creep, and it becomes really difficult to manage unless you have some good clarity in your contract that explains what's going to happen. All right, here's a second problem client, the friendly monster question mark. So what is the question mark? Generally, this is a person who has no idea what they want, or they want everything, but they ask endless questions. One question leads to another, leads to three, leads to five. They have no goals. They have no budget. What's a budget? We just want to talk. We want to ask questions. We want to dream our little dream about this thing we're trying to build. And the containment strategy that's most effective when you deal with a question mark is a focus on commitment. And this is so important, because if you're trying to be a nice person with a question mark, they will let you invest hours and hours in that relationship before they ever even consider making a commitment back to you. These clients are classic time wasters. So what do? We're going to require at the beginning of the project a discovery form that's going to take some thought for them to put in and answer some of these questions. If you're going to commit to them for an hour initial consultation, the purpose of that meeting is to gather information for you to create a proposal. It is not there for them to daydream and think and vision and all of these things, or to pick your brain. How many brain picking meetings have you put on your calendar because this potential client wanted to pick your brain about something that they wanted to do? So the most important thing I can suggest is, in dealing with a question mark, is to get to price early. What I've learned is that the best way to contain a question mark is with a dollar sign. The minimum price to work with me is blank, or whatever. But as soon as you put a dollar figure on the table, the question marks, they tend to stop asking questions because it just got real. Get to price early with this kind of client. And if talking price is something that is difficult for you, that's something that I would talk with a coach or have some colleagues you talk this through with, because you will continue to get frustrated with people just like this, and you'll waste a lot of time if you have struggles about talking about price and just being clear on what your expectations are out of the relationship. A lot of times a discovery phase or a consulting agreement is important. They really may not know what they want to do. And if you want to come in and help them add some structure to all of their questions, you can do that with a discovery phase. And the discovery phase has a scope of work and a price and a deliverable, just like any other project you do. The scope of work is we're going to answer these 10 questions. The deliverable is either a Zoom conversation or a document where those questions are answered, and here's what it's going to cost. So, like, instead of taking 3 hours to help a client think through in a coffee shop how they're going to do this e-commerce site for this jewelry they want to create and how they're going to do shipping and fulfillment and taxes and all of that, I've done that for free, just for the privilege of maybe writing a proposal that maybe they'll accept or not. I've wasted so much time with these folks. So don't be like me. Get the price early and use a discovery phase. The brain that they want to pick has information in it that costs you years of your life to learn, and that information has value. So don't be afraid to charge for it. All right. The next friendly monster is the boundary buster. This is a not so friendly monster, to be honest. These are the ones that I like the least. The boundary buster will send you an email at 3 a.m. with a 7:30 a.m. follow-up wondering why you haven't gotten it done yet. They tend to insist on after-hours meetings. They will work weekends and holidays, and they expect you to as well. I have very little tolerance for these folks because I allowed these people to run my life for many years. And the containment strategy for these folks is communication. Just be very clear on how and when you work. I work during normal business hours. I don't work on weekends or regular holidays. And if you need me outside of those hours for a true emergency, there is an upcharge of 100%. There's a rush fee or an overtime fee. It's a 2x of what I normally charge. You'll be surprised how all of a sudden their urgency isn't so urgent anymore. We have to clearly communicate how and when we work. Now, this is how I would, for many years, I would tend to create my own boundary busters by trying to be a nice guy. For example, I would be sitting in my recliner watching TV with my family, 8 o'clock on a weeknight. And of course, I had my laptop open because I always had my screen open. And being a little email pops in from a client asking for me to do something on their website. And so I log in, take a quick thing, shoot them an email back. Yeah, great, got it done, no problem. And I pat myself on the back for giving such great customer support. However, what have I done? I've just told my client they can email me at 8 p.m. any night and I'll have an immediate response for them. I've just fed the mogwai after midnight. I've created a monster. Now, I did this for years and thinking it was great customer support. So this is something in my own habits that I had to change. I began to set the tone in the initial meetings for how and when I would follow up. I don't meet clients at night or on the weekends unless there are genuinely extraordinary circumstances, which are very rare. The boundary buster is going to test all of your fences. So don't break your own rules. Don't tear down your own fences. This is an excellent candidate for what I call a PETA surcharge. That's the pain in the asterisk surcharge, right? And if I'm going to work with this person, it's going to be worth it. There's an extra upcharge that they're going to receive. And again, these are sometimes you just have to fire the client. If you didn't realize you're dealing with a boundary buster and they just continue to misbehave, you don't have to work with everybody. You can say, no, I'm done. Just make absolutely certain that this scenario is covered in your contract because this kind of client will nail you to the wall if they can. But don't be afraid to fire the client as long as you have good documents to back you up. All right, the fourth problem client, the fourth friendly monster is the drama queen. Again, this is gender neutral. There are plenty of drama kings out there too. Believe me, I've met them and worked with them. You're working with a drama queen when everything is an emergency. Their favorite word is now. It's got to be done right now. Or they worked with another developer who did everything wrong. I had a coaching client for years who used to call these diva clients. I get that. That makes sense. And I got to tell you, these complaints about previous developers are huge red flags. Now, a lot of times, look, I've been doing WordPress since 2010. I have logged into WordPress sites where the developer is gone, they disappeared, evaporated. I'm thinking somebody had to think really hard to build something this badly. There are really bad developers out there. I'm not discounting that. But whenever I'm meeting with a client and they start talking about this previous developer who did everything wrong, it is a hard stop. And I'm going to ask a whole bunch of questions and dig into this. Tell me what they did. Help me explain what made this relationship go off the rails. Because if I don't unpack that, I might be dealing with a drama queen that There's nobody that is ever going to be able to please them. And if I don't avoid this, then they're going to be sitting across the table from one of you in 6 months complaining about me. So I'm going to really dig into that. Some clients can't be pleased. So the containment strategy for dealing with the drama queen, if you haven't guessed it already, is documentation. Stick to your system because system always beats drama. The huge takeaway here. When the drama queen comes back with all these many capital letters in the email that they send, insisting that you do things this way and that way, all you have to do is refer back to your contract, to your process that they've already agreed to at the beginning. And I'm sorry, this is how we do things, and this is what you agreed to. Hold their feet to the fire. System beats drama. But you have to keep good records when you deal with this kind of client because they will change their mind about something in a meeting and never remember that they did that. That's why those follow-up emails are so important to document the fact that decisions were made. We've got to document. I think we've got time to do our bonus monster. This is the penny pincher. This is the person that wants an $8,000 site for $1,000. They are overly concerned about costs. Now, by the way, good clients are concerned about costs too. So don't push back on clients if they want to negotiate or whatever. The difference between a good client and a penny pincher is that good clients really do want to be fair with you. They want a win-win, but penny pinchers won't respect you. They only want what's good for them, or they want to pay you in equity. Oh man, how many times have I heard this story? Oh, I've got this great new idea and you come on and you build it for me and I'll give you 20% of all the sales or whatever. Let me tell you, folks, I had been doing this for 30 years, okay? Since the web was beginning to walk upright. Like 1995 is when I started building websites for clients. And never, not once, never, ever have I had an equity deal work ever. And honestly, in my head, this is what I have to remind myself. So you want me to invest my time and expertise in your project, even though you don't believe in it enough to hire me. That helps me keep the right frame of mind when I deal with this penny pincher and wanting to pay me in equity. So what do you do with a client like this? This one takes all the fences. Penny pinchers take all the things. You got to be sure if you decide to work with one of these folks, or if you have found all of a sudden you're working with one of these folks, be sure your scope of work is clear. It's okay to say no to working with this kind of person. Bad clients are never, ever worth the hassle. It is never worth whatever money they're bringing in for the mental and emotional capital they will steal from you. This particular kind of client will bleed you dry and consider it a job well done. A quick side note, several times during this conversation, I've mentioned the importance of having a great contract in dealing with all of these problem clients. It comes up all the time of keeping our problem clients in check by a good set of fences, which is documented in our contract. And it's for this very reason that I did create Monster Contracts many years ago. Monster Contracts is based on my own agency contract that I've revised and refined over 30 years of working with clients building websites. It's a proven contract for WordPress client work. So there's a lot of different kinds of contracts out there. Some of them are just very basic and full of holes. Some of them are straight legalese that nobody can understand. Monster Contracts is different. It addresses the specific situations that have come up in my 30 years of web work with clients. Virtually any paragraph in this contract, I can go back and tell you a story of why that paragraph is in there. And as I've worked with freelancers and agency owners and coaching over the last 10 years, what I realized is that if they had a contract, it was either just a bunch of legalese or just something very plain language, and it didn't really cover them legally. And neither of those is adequate for a growing business. So if you don't have a good contract, I would suggest taking a look at Monster Contracts, monstercontracts.com. There is a 10% off coupon, My Web Audit, for watching this video, and that'll get you 10% off the purchase of Monster Contracts. Okay, quick review, and then we'll open up for some questions. So we learned today clients are friendly monsters, and we must keep them contained by 4 fences: clarity, commitments, communication, and documentation. Now, I want to leave you with this final question before we get to Q&A, and that is, how strong are your fences today? And consider for a moment, how much better would your business be if you had consistent processes that were documented into strong fences? How much mental and emotional capital could you stop flying out the window because these problem clients are stealing those things from you? So my encouragement to you today is to start putting these fences in place and watch how things will begin to change. It'll make your business better. It'll make your life better because good fences make great clients. Thanks, everybody.